Hi, happy Tuesday, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Our webinar will begin shortly. And while we wait, please feel free to enter into the chat where you're joining us from. We always love to see where everyone is tuning in from across the globe. Thank you, Bethany from Arizona, for getting us started. If you have any questions for our speakers today, we encourage you to ask those questions. But if you could, please refrain from using the chat and use the Q&A section located at the bottom of your screen, right next to the resources tab. That way we won't miss you, and we'll get to those questions after today's presentation concludes. Again, welcome. Good day and hello everyone. Welcome back to our event called HRCI Insights. These are episodes that provide insights on current HR services, developments, and technologies. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before I get started, we have a couple housekeeping items. This is an interactive session, so please use the chat to talk amongst yourselves and tell us where you're tuning in from. The chat is also a great way for you to expand your professional network and to learn from each other. We just kindly ask you limit your LinkedIn profile shares to 2 times so we can carry on that conversation. And also, please ensure you keep all comments professional and respectful. Any bad actors will be ejected. If you have any questions for our speakers today, again, please remember to use that Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, right next to the resources tab. Also, we want HRCI Insights to be accessible to everyone, so we have closed captioning running. If you do not need this resource, please click on Show Captions across the bottom of your screen, and then choose caption options to hide subtitles. If you are new to HRCI, we welcome you. If you're a returning attendee, we are happy to see you again. We are honored that all of you have joined us today, and we always encourage you to bring a friend next time, whether they are certified or not. My name is Megan Hayes. I'm the Director of Corporate Sponsorships here at HRCI. Today's topic is why managers are struggling, fixing the recognition tools that no longer work. I would happily like to welcome back our bonusly team members, A.G. Glover and David Brown, and they brought along a special guest, Kamaria Scott, who will join us here shortly. But from here, I'm going to welcome over to David, who will take over from here. Welcome to you all. We're so glad to see you. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Hello, Megan, and hello, HRCI. We are so happy to be back. I think it's the first time that we've done 2 webinars in 1 month with you all, so it's been a great month over here for us. But we are just really looking forward to today's conversation and the topic, part 2 from our series from a couple weeks ago. But before we get started, as always, we want to do some introductions. And so my name is David. I am on the marketing team here at Bonusly, and I am calling from Jacksonville, Florida. I saw a few others of you in the chat, as well as some other Floridians. So welcome. Everybody else on the East Coast, I see you're enjoying the Florida weather, no matter how far north you are right now. But I would love to pass it to our speakers today. We'll start with Adri, but would love to just have you share with everyone, what your role is, a little bit about your company, and then, regarding today's topic, would love for you just to share really just one of the most impactful pieces of recognition that you have received.
Hello, everybody. Hello, David. So happy to be here with all of you today. My name is Adri Glover. I am VP of People at Bonusly. Bonusly, where David and I are at, is a company that's really committed to bringing out the best and unlocking our employees' talent and potential through recognition done right. And we're excited to share more about that today. I'm from the New York City area. I've been on the team about 2.5 years, and I love this question about just most impactful recognition I've received. There's been many moments throughout my career, and especially at Bonusly, but I would say most recently, I received a promotion to VP of People and Culture here on our team. And my manager, Radhika Samant, who's our COO, we've had an amazing journey together over 2 to 3 companies. And being able to look at my journey over the past several years and her seeing all the work behind the scenes was just magical to feel that that sense of just belief, in me and my abilities and my commitment. And to also see that she recorded a video, even though video recognition is something that's very new and, something she's getting used to. So I think just going the extra mile, feeling that journey, and just knowing all behind the scenes meant so, so much.
David, you're on
We
mute.
did. Amazing. Thank you so much, Adrian. I'll pass it over to you, Kamaria.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kamaria Scott. I am the founder and CEO of Enetic. We are a boutique consulting firm that is dedicated to improving the performance of people leaders. We believe that everyone deserves the benefit of having an excellent manager. And so we build structures and systems around them to make their performance inevitable, not just by chance. I am calling in, or I'm visiting from the Orlando area. I saw lots of people that are here from Orlando or even just Florida. So hello to all of my Jacksonville, Miami, Tampa colleagues that are joining us today. And when we talk about recognition, I always share something that's near and dear to my heart. It happened many, many years ago, but it stuck with me over the years. I was working for an organization and I was launching their very first employee engagement survey org-wide across 47,000 employees. And I practically had a cot under my desk. And, my manager and I used to have these conversations about parent guilt. You spend so much time at work that sometimes if you have littles, you feel a little bit, guilty that you're not at home. And so when we got to this major milestone in the project, we finally hit send and the survey went out to everyone. Rhonda, you're from Altamont, so am I. Just want to throw that in there. When we finally hit send on that button, she called me into her office and she gave me a $50 gift card to my son's favorite restaurant. And she said, listen, I know that you have put in so many hours on this project, and I just want to give you a little bit of time back with your son. And so she gave me this gift card to his favorite restaurant so we could go play with Wiki Sticks together. And that has literally, he's 21 now, he was 5 at the time, but it has stayed with me as the most meaningful recognition that I've ever received.
I love it. I cannot wait for today's discussion. Like Megan mentioned, especially with our Bonusly webinars, we love to make them engaging. And so please, we would love to hear your thoughts in the chat. We love just watching the chat go nonstop. With that being said, if you have any questions for the end of the webinar, please use the Q&A box because I promise you that question will get lost in the chat. But the other thing I will say is I will share Adri and Kamaria's LinkedIn's at the end, so you all can connect, especially if you're in the Orlando area. I know Kamaria would love to connect with you, so stay tuned for that at the end. And so before we get started, I just want to set the stage here for just a couple minutes. And so I would be curious, how many of you were in the part 1 episode that we did just a couple weeks ago? That episode was really all about why managers are struggling, and we talked really about feedback and guidance as a tool. And so, some of this information may be repetitive if you saw it on the last one, but this is your first time joining. We will for sure send that recording out to you all. But, we here at Bonusly, we really understand and know that managers and teams are burned out. Employees are disengaged. We see the news articles, we see the LinkedIn posts, but we really truly believe it's not, for the most part, about bad people. It really is about broken systems. And so, like we talked about feedback in the part 1, we're going to be talking today about recognition and really how we can use that, especially managers, as a tool. And so, again, we're not going to read through all these stats, but you can see here on the screen, people are burned out, employees are disengaged, and it really is so crucial regarding today's webinar in the context of managers. Engagement is taking, and it really isn't because they don't care. We truly believe it's because they're stuck in systems that have set them up to fail, especially in today's world. And so, like I said, it's not a them problem. We tend to blame it on sometimes bad communication, weak leadership, lack of initiative, which, sometimes may be the case, but it really doesn't tell the full story. It really is the issue that managers don't care or they aren't trying. It really is systemic. And so we've brought up, these 3 areas that are just examples, when we talk about outdated tools. We really see this when we talk about the annual review and sometimes clunky HR systems that are stuck in the past. and underdeveloped skills. Sometimes managers weren't trained to lead. They were promoted because they were really good at their job, and then they were promoted and then just left with no training. And I think one of the really big ones today that definitely resonates a lot with people is overloaded roles. And I think this goes for, oftentimes employees across the board, but especially for managers. They are always playing this player coach role right now where they have their own, piling workload, but also their employees and direct reports who they have to manage. And so it really isn't necessarily a them problem, it's the system problem. And so today we're going to talk about really how we can use recognition, especially managers, to help fix this. And so we boiled it down to this equation, high expectations plus low support equals chaos. And I don't think I have to, this isn't going to be breaking news to anybody, but what's happening in the world right now is sometimes chaotic, if not always right now. We have constant pendulum swinging from return to office to remote work to hybrid. We have the generational shift in the workforce where we right now have the most generations ever working together in the workplace. And more responsibilities, like we said, the player coach roles, fewer resources. And that's only really in the workplace. You turn on the news and there's a constant news alert or news story or just constant economic pressure. And so today's managers really are facing this perfect storm, and we're really letting them just sink or swim. And so we have these four pillars that we discussed last time. We talk about the annual reviews, how they really are so just inadequate and don't do much for us nowadays. We talked about one-on-ones a lot last time, how crucial they are, how important they are, but how, oftentimes they're the most canceled, they're the most rushed, they're just reduced to checking off a status box and not really building that connection or really investing in your direct reports. We discussed workloads, but really today what we're going to hone in on is recognition. Right now we're leaving managers with outdated systems that really do just feel ceremonial or impersonal and really don't do much to help. Today's employees are craving recognition that's definitely timely, it's in the moment, it's specific, and most importantly, it's tied to real impact, showing the direct report that what you did matters and here is what it did. But really, managers nowadays aren't equipped. And so we're going to talk today about ways that you can really empower your managers, really talking about the importance of it. Because at the end of the day, teams, employees, direct reports really just want purpose, passion, and potential. They want to know that what they're working on constantly day in and day out matters. They want to see how their role connects to the bigger picture. They want to know that they aren't stuck, that they're being constantly coached and developed and given space to grow, whether that be lateral, whether it be a promotion. And they want passion, that comes from feeling seen and supported by, not only your peers, but definitely your manager, and turns work into, something that's worth showing up for because what you're doing matters. And today's managers really need clarity, capacity, and confidence. Capacity, like we talked about, they want time and space to, not just do their work or help, do what they need to do, but really focus on managing their direct reports. Clarity, they want to see that what their team is doing is working. They want to know, progress. They want to know priorities. They want to see that, the initiatives are being accomplished, but oftentimes don't have visibility into that. And then confidence, so we talk about a lot here at Bonusly, but really just giving them the tools and especially the training to give great feedback and recognition. That's why I'm so happy that Kamaria decided to join us today for today's webinar. I just can't wait for you to hear just more about her and what she does. And then Adri, of course, who this is what, your 15th time now with the HRCI crowd, but just really passionate about all things recognition here at Bonusly. And so these two powerful tools that we're discussing in this series, guidance, feedback. Again, we'll share that recording out after this. But today, recognition, really talking about how it isn't a formality. It really is a tool that reinforces the behaviors that you want to see more of. When managers give recognition, especially in the moment, I feel like we're going to say that so much today, but especially in the moment and tying it to specific impact or company values even, it doesn't just boost morale, but it really clarifies expectations and shows what good looks like for your team and for your company. And so these two tools are incredibly powerful. And with that, we are going to dive into today's discussion on recognition. And so we have a few questions that we're going to be asking Kamaria and Adri. But if anything, throughout the webinar comes up, would love for you to use that Q&A box again. Let us know. We'll save some time at the end for you all. But with that, let's get into the first question. And so we'll start with you, Kamaria, but let's just set the stage here and hear from the both of you. Why, in your view, do you think that recognition is such a powerful driver of engagement and performance? And why does it matter so much, especially when it comes from managers?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think, my opening story about that recognition that I received from my manager, it encapsulates why I think it's so important to performance and engagement, and that it signifies that I see you. It signifies that I see the effort that you've put in. I see sometimes the sacrifices that you've made for the organization. So I think that recognition is so important because it's a celebration of what you have done, the efforts that you've made for an organization. But I also think it's really important because recognition is also a celebration of who you are. And sometimes we miss that point. So like I am notorious for giving my team members like nicknames or monikers when I introduce them. So I might say like, this is Joanna and she is my crisis catching queen. And that basically means like if there's a glass on the edge of the table, she's the person in the room who's going to find it. And she's going to find it before it hits the floor. And so that's not necessarily formal recognition, but it's saying, I see who she is and I want other people to see who she is. And so that just drives engagement, but it also helps her move towards her potential because I think sometimes when we are thinking about recognition, we're looking backwards when it's a wonderful tool for helping people to move forward. So if I say it enough times, she's my crisis catching queen. She's going to start to internalize that, and she's going to find just really just faith, and that's her skill and her ability. So I think as a manager, because we're so close to people, we can see not only what they've done, but we can see their potential, and we can really start using recognition as a way to motivate them and move them toward what's really possible for them.
I love that, Kamaria. And, I think catching queen is going to be something that sticks with me now. Love that. I think for me, as I think about recognition to add, it's also a powerful tool in terms of building connections, right? David alluded to this earlier in terms of today's world of work, whether you're returning to office, you're hybrid, you're fully remote, like us at Bonusly. We have teams since COVID, even before, that are working in different geographical locations. You may not be on the same location or office as your manager, right? And then you also have aspects over the past 2 years of layoffs and doing more with less, right? And, there is a big sense, for those that are following Gallup 12, of measuring employee loneliness. And I think that irrespective of geographic location, teams are craving feeling connected. Managers do want to recognize and see what is going on with their teams. And employees also want to be seen for their humanness, to Kamaria's point. And I think that recognition is just such a powerful tool in terms of, again, helping employees be seen, helping them be valued, helping them to reinforce that appreciation for what they're doing day in and day out to contribute towards goals or helping fellow team members. Beyond that, we spoke earlier about purpose, passion, and potential. Recognition has that amazing opportunity to build on inclusivity and belonging and really connect to purpose. And, for us, I think that, employees, I love this expression. Molly on my team always says this: a little bit of recognition and kindness goes a long way. When you look at your team's calendar and you see those back to back to back meetings and, someone taking that end of day call or hopping on to make sure a customer is set or that your team is okay, that goes the longest way just towards making sure that someone really feels appreciated for being human. And again, that they're visible through that work. And in today's day and age, I think that it's an absolutely must have versus, something that we consider as like a perk these days. So I'll take a moment to pause there. But as a whole, if you look at the bigger picture, starting with those moments of recognition and valuing our team, again, lead to bigger potential on performance conversations, ROI in terms of employee retention, feeling happy at work, feeling connected, and again, that sense of belonging.
Absolutely. I know we're going to get to it later, but I saw there was a question in the chat around, giving gift cards. And it really is, that's one thing that we talk about a lot too. Like, a lot of people do think like, if I'm going to recognize my direct report, or if I want to show someone recognition, I have to give them a gift card or something. But a lot of times like that is, not the case. Like employees truly just do want the words. They want to be known that what they're doing matters, that they're seen. And like Kamaria said, and in the chat, a lot of people loved it, but it shows that you're valued. Sometimes you may use a gift card or, you may have a tool like Bonusly where you can send points, but really at the end of the day, it's really the message and especially the timeliness of it versus just a physical, gift that you may send with it.
And David, can I add something to that? Because, I always, whenever I tell that story about the gift card, I always want people to take away from that story that it wasn't necessarily the gift card that made it meaningful. It was that she heard me talk about my son's love of wiki sticks. Right. And the appreciation for the time that we invested. So it wasn't necessarily like, here's a random gift card. It's, I heard you say that this is your son's favorite restaurant. I've been paying attention to you and I know you. And I think when we are thinking about, gifting and wanting to recognize people, the underlying message is always, I see you, I know who you are, and I want this to reflect that I know that about you. So, it wasn't just the, oh, I lost a camera there. It wasn't just the gift card in and of itself, but it was really I heard you. I know what this means. I've talked to your son. I want y'all to have this moment together. So being deliberate and intentional is such an important part of that.
Mhm. Absolutely. And, one of my favorite aspects and examples of this, and I know we're derailing from the questions, but we, in Bonusly, like we have, a rewards catalog where you can cash in your points, all that good stuff. But one thing that I just love talking about is there's a points boost option. If you're out of points to give people, you can trade in some of your points for more to give out. And, we thought this was going to be a nice little, just addition to add. But out of, millions of users that we have, it is the second most redeemed gift in the catalog, which really shows that, employees could get a gift card somewhere, but they truly just, it's like a snowball effect. Like the more that recognition is happening, the more that they're recognized, the more they want to recognize others. And I just, love that point. But let's get back to the conversation. Adri, so, we talked about, why it's so important coming from managers, recognition. Managers, like we discussed, are burnt out. They are exhausted. One of our managers wrote a blog yesterday that said, I look at my screen at 5 p.m. and I'm like, where did the day go? So managers are exhausted. And so a lot of managers really, validly say, I don't have time. I don't know what to say, or, a number of different reasons why they don't recognize, especially in the moment. And so we'll start with you, Adri, but what would you say to them and how can organizations, especially the people leaders on this call, how can they help remove some of those barriers?
Absolutely, David. And, I'll go off of what Kamaria was saying earlier about intentionality, right? I think a lot of us get into the space of we are so busy, we're all in back-to-backs, our calendars look crazy, right? And that for managers to think, oh my gosh, I have to stop or like create all this extra time to like really recognize my team and make it meaningful. And my feedback to that would be that if we're really doing it right, we shouldn't be overthinking it. It really should be that personal touch and connection. We as managers know our team best, right? We are on the front lines. We know what's going on in terms of the day-to-day, but we also hear the stories, about their families and what's talked about at the dinner table and, kids starting preschool, whatever it might be. And I think leaning into those relationships and just keeping it human, keeping it casual, being our authentic selves is really what matters, right? So, a lot of times we think about big reward programs, but in a nutshell, again, looking at Gallup, employees that feel most engaged are receiving recognition around every 7 days. I think when we really boil down aspects of, some of the barriers, it's creating space within our day-to-day workflows versus like building in more time, right? So some things that I really look at are investing in a general culture of recognition that has to start with our leaders and managers, but ultimately gives employees this democratic feeling of like we're all contributing towards that winning culture and enabling each other together. When I think about keys to success, recognition to me should be like a heartbeat. It should be consistent. It should be steady. It should be this normal rhythm that we get into a cadence. And, again, pseudo runs on autopilot if we're doing it right. I want to always make sure that recognition, again, can be lightweight. It can start by just being in your weekly one-on-one with your team to call out some of the great things that you saw on a customer call, or I saw that you took the extra time or that call end of day to help a fellow team member prepare for a webinar or prep for a rehearsal in a pitch or a meeting. Recognition in that regard just keeps it natural. It goes with that aspect of human relationship building, and it's factored into our day-to-day workflows versus this added separate process. What I love when I think about these barriers of like just considering recognition is we always think it has to necessarily be always about performance. I love that Kamaria called out the human aspect, right? Like recognition is also very much about being an employee and being seen for you. So that might be your first day as a new hire, like just being welcomed and recognized, celebrating special milestones like your anniversary, your promotion, a birthday, a team member's birthday, right? And then beyond that, some of the things I think are really special are like those milestones, such as like, getting married, having a new baby, adopting a puppy, like so many special things as we think about recognition to just keep that top of mind. I think sometimes we tend to think about recognition as being heavyweight and again, like very focused. But to David's point, a lot of these are like looking at old school processes and barriers that have like just kind of not worked in today's world of work and how time has just become moving faster and getting busier and busier. So again, when I think about removing barriers, it's again, creating that heartbeat and day-to-day ritual. Look at your one-on-ones, look at your team meetings. Something we love doing at Bonusly are weekly wins, where we just have the opportunity, not just for managers, but give our team the chance to shout out, what are they proud of? What are things that they've seen, within other departments or within the team that we can celebrate, we can talk about. All hands are also amazing opportunities to call those out and to celebrate just bigger wins across the company. What are we working towards, right? Whether it's a sales deal or we closed a new client, right? Just amazing things to keep top of mind. And then, you could look at things like nomination processes. If you want to make it peer-to-peer, again, I believe that culture comes from each of us. Managers need our support now more than ever. And HR, again, we are facilitators of culture. We are also employees that walk through those doors virtually or, in person, right? So being able to enable a culture where we can empower managers to think about recognition within these spaces that are organic to them, that make it lightweight, that can be a simple Slack message, can be a shout out within a live one-on-one, I think creates authenticity in terms of our own styles, voice, and just making that meaningful in the very moment.
Oh, David, you're on mute.
Oh, I keep doing that. Thank you so much, Adri. But Maria, same question for you. I know you have some great examples for this one.
I do. So first, I have to just let you all know that when I met the team at Bonusly, I immediately was like, "These are my people." I hope you all feel the same way because we feel the same way about systems and about people leaders and helping them be successful. And I love this question because I think one of the reasons that managers don't recognize is because we treat time like we treat money. We budget it. And when we have a budget, it's like we know specifically where we're going to spend money, but with our time, we don't typically take that same approach. And so, one of the things that I encourage managers to do is to think is that every behavior has a home. And when every behavior has a home, then you know where to park that behavior. And so Adrian just gave us some really good examples of like, what's the home for recognition? And so I always tell managers, recognition lives in your team meetings. There's a home there. It should be a part of your standard agenda. It lives in your one-on-ones when you're having those conversations with your direct reports about something that's happened. It lives there. As you can tell, I believe it lives in introductions. But giving managers a little bit of structure and guidance, that's why I love that I saw guidance on the screen earlier. Giving them guidance actually takes some of the guesswork out of it. So a lot of times they don't do it because, frankly, it's an afterthought. If you have ever read the book Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, they talk about decision paralysis. We have so many decisions to make that we end up making no decisions. And so when we think about managers who are in crisis fighting mode all the time, for them to stop their brains and go, wait, I need to recognize, is a little bit hard for them. So the first part of kind of like why they think they don't have time is because they're going from thing to thing and they've not been intentional and they've not prepared for the recognition that they need to give. And so to that end, I always recommend that managers sit with their teams and have a conversation around what is it that we should be recognizing. So we talked about values, we talked about moments and milestones, we talked about special events. Managers should really have that conversations with their teams to ask them, what are the things that you want to celebrate? And I've done this with my teams lots of times because you don't want it to feel like random high fives all over the place, but you want it to be meaningful to your team and you want to involve them in the process of creating what does meaningful recognition look like. So I love that Adrian mentioned that we want them to build a culture of recognition, and that's something that managers can do by having that conversation. The other thing that I always try to help managers think about is that it's not your job to do all of the recognizing. Someone in the chat said, yes, if I'm going to try to recognize people and I have a team of 10 or more, gosh, that's a lot. That's a lot. I'd be recognizing all day long. But the idea is that we want managers to create their own recognition systems. And what I mean by that is, I don't know why my camera just keeps disappearing on me, but what I mean by that is that managers have the opportunity to say, not only what do we want to recognize, how do we want to recognize, but who are going to be our recognition leaders? And that way you get to spread the love. It doesn't just fall on the manager to do all the recognizing. So like on my teams, we had birthday buddies. So we were like, what do we want to recognize? And my team said, we want to recognize birthdays and anniversaries. And I was like, I'm terrible with dates. And so one of my team members was like, well, I have a Magic 8-Ball app. And I was like, great. And so she matched us all up. And then each one of us was responsible for somebody else's birthday and somebody else's work anniversary. And it was wonderful because literally I had people singing each other's songs. Somebody sent me a sparkly unicorn because it's my jam. But what it did for me as a people leader, and what I would want managers to take away from this, is that we don't want you overwhelmed trying to manage everything yourself. We want you to build your team's internal recognition system so that you know that it's happening, but it doesn't always have to come from you.
I love that. And I think that's so important, both to what you and Adri said. It doesn't always have to be the managers. And I think another thing that both of you said that was, just spot on is, building that culture of recognition. And it's, people in the chat have said it often, not only in this webinar, but in others, but there is also no one size fits all. And that goes for companies, but also teams. I mean, your marketing team at Bonusly could have a whole different way that they do it, different things that they recognize each other for, a different cadence, and it could work tremendously for them. But you can't just copy and paste that over to the sales team. Like, they have a different version that they want. They have different things they want to be recognized for than the marketing team. And so I think those are just two just crucial things to hit on, because it comes up often, and it really is, what works best for your company and for your team. And that's, something that takes some time to figure out at times. But I think, Kamaria, let's stick with you. And this one is a good one because we talk about how, recognition, when done right, is timely, specific, and meaningful. And so this ties into this question because a lot of times, you think recognizing, okay, let me just say good job, like, hey, great job this week. Hey, great job last week on everything. How do we help managers move beyond sometimes surface level praise like that and really make it more specific and, sometimes values aligned or meaningful?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I always try to help managers think about is, why are you recognizing this person? Like, what are you aiming for? So I've given a couple of examples of sort of like how I use recognition. And so if you're recognizing them because you're trying to give them their potential, then use that language. Be very clear about what it is you're trying to accomplish. So it's like, David, you did a wonderful job with that webinar. I could tell people were engaged. Let's think about how we can get you to do more of that, right? So that's not just, you did a good job, high five, but it is thinking through, what is the intent or impact, and what do you want that person to take away from it, and how are you matching them in what it is they want to have done? So when I work with people leaders, one of the things I try to help them to think about, one of my favorite assessments is McClellan's motivational needs, because it breaks people down into, are they achievement oriented? Are they motivated by being around other people and collaboration? Are they motivated by power and the ability to make decisions? Because if I can figure that out, if I can figure out how to make that recognition right for what they want, and how to give them meaningful recognition in a way that they're like, this is for me. So if I finish a project because I'm achievement oriented, I want to be recognized with another big hairy project. And then I make sure my words match that, right? So Kamaria, I know how much you love a good project. You did a great job on this last one. I want to give you another opportunity to flex your decision making, or to take on a bigger project and give you some increased responsibility, right? Now I understand why you're recognizing me and what I'm going to do with it. If it's, hey, you know what, Adri, I noticed that you closed this client account and we have an opportunity, because I know that you really enjoy meeting new people. We have some actual tickets to a conference that we're going to, and there are going to be some senior leaders there that I would love for them for them to meet you, so you can expand your network. So I'm verbalizing, right, the what and the why of that recognition, and I think that's the thing that we kind of help to the people leaders should think about. So what is it? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Why, how do we do it? But then how do we verbalize it so that our actions and our words are in alignment, and the person on the receiving end is like, okay, I know what I was recognized for. I know how this recognition was personalized to me, and I know how to take it forward. So if we can just be thinking about that and teach managers how to use that approach, it will help them to grow leaps and bounds in their ability to recognize effectively.
Myra, that's so beautifully said. And I wanted to add, I'm having like a twinning moment, because as I was thinking about this question, you said the what and the why. And to me, to add on, I was thinking about the what and also the how, right? And as I think about, recognition done right, and really helping managers move beyond that surface level of like, great job, keep doing what you're doing. It's talking about like, what are they doing? Why are we working towards to enable? But how? Like, how are you really creating that impact? And I think that managers have incredible potential to share some of these beautiful stories that can really go unseen and be invisible in our day-to-day way of work. I talked about packed calendars, managers, all of us doing a little bit more with less, and the ability to spotlight some of those stories, right? I think that it's incredible. It can go so much further beyond like, thanks so much for helping me with this webinar. But to your point, I saw the engagement, your tone was like perfectly on pitch. And I think as managers, as we're in touch with our team's strengths, as well as growth and development areas combined with motivation, this is an incredible opportunity to build up that confidence, to build up that trust, to enable that employee to know not just, hey, you're on track, but this is where, for example, if you're an employee who is new to maybe speaking in webinars or working on your presentation skills, that reinforcement goes the longest way. So again, the what, the why, and the how are you doing that? And I find that there are such beautiful stories that I see within Bonusly of how, not only what are we doing, how are we doing it, why are we doing it, but the real, like, how does that contribute towards our bigger mission, vision, values, right? And going back to behaviors, I think managers could also think about our company values. We talked about great recognition being specific, timely, connecting, being values aligned. There's so much around behaviors that we also want to reinforce in our culture, not just say, hey, do a great job at all expense. And that means that it's okay that, maybe you're not the nicest to your fellow team members, or you're the rising star on the sales team. I think that creating a culture of recognition is bringing everybody up with us too, and calling out the moments of like leadership and things that we want to reinforce. And that these are beautiful opportunities just to really reflect on how are we moving the needles, helping employees, again, see their purpose, see their strengths, see their ability to even raise the bar higher, in terms of making an impact. And when we think about that, I think that it's amazing to also expand, not only what are you doing in your role, but how does that impact our team, our department, maybe our broader organizational goals? There's so many powerful and incredible lenses to think about when you really reflect on the power of recognition. and how we as managers can be authentic and really help tell those stories and shape a narrative for employees to learn and grow from.
I love it. And I think it ties very well with, part one of this series. Recognition is sometimes even just a great avenue into feedback. Like to, your point, Maria, like that webinar was great, XYZ, like here's what we could even do next time. And I think that's so important too, because recognition then can also turn into the guidance moment. We were talking about it in one-on-ones. And that's why, I just had like this light bulb moment when you said that. But it's so true. And I just love that you called that out. Adri, let's stick with you with this next one. You talked a lot about, purpose, progress, belonging. We talked about it in the opening of this webinar as well. But what role does recognition play, especially in building psychological safety and team trust? And how can managers use that intentionally?
It's a great one, David. And I'll start just going back a little to set the context and framework here. But we talked about earlier that engagement is at an all-time low. As we're looking at today's employees and the workforce, whether it's dispersed workforces, layoffs, employees doing more with less, just being tired, managers also having that compounded effect. There's an element, around feeling that you can be your authentic self at work, and being okay to raise your hand, right? And ask a question and get feedback, but also knowing that, how do I know that I am on track? And how do I know that it's okay for me to be vulnerable, and ask a question to help with my growth and development. Maybe I should know that already. So a lot of that, I think, is broader framing we could do for managers to just set the tone in our culture, right? Create a culture where asking questions, is a valuable thing, and that there's no such thing as a silly question there. But I think that, Bonusly also launched earlier this year a State of Recognition report, which really highlights 3 core factors, right? Talking about this element of engagement. And the findings were around many aspects and, kind of, I'm losing the word, I'm so sorry. Looking at examples in the workplace, but the 3 core areas were around employees being disengaged on clarity of expectations, meaning that for us, less than half of employees know what's expected of them at work, and know what they're doing well on and how to get things on right track. 2, feeling that someone cares about them as a person at work, right? And these are questions that are very much embedded in the Gallup 12 engagement surveys. Right now, a third of employees feel that someone at work cares about them. It's shockingly low. And then last, someone encouraging their growth and development, with around less than a third of responses really identifying with that. So when we think about, these aspects of recognition playing a place in psychological safety, trust, and how managers can be intentional around this, I think that it's really important to start with those foundations of how employees are showing up to work today, and how managers create really, not only that lifeline, but that human touch around embracing care for our team as people, care for their growth, care for transparency. Recognition really starts with that trust of relationship building, and to know that someone is invested in helping you to call out the best potentials that you could bring for yourself, setting the tone for the team around that again, culture of recognition, right? It starts with the manager, it starts with our leaders, but it enables that ripple effect of other employees to also feel those wins and build into that culture together. And when we think about this decline in employees feeling lonely and not connected, this is a great way for them to feel visible, to know that their work matters, that they're making an impact. And again, that, maybe for the day-to-day or your peers, maybe closer to your work, but when you hear that from a leader, when you hear that from your manager, it's all the more impactful, for you to know that you have ability to grow, you have someone investing in you. And again, you have clarity, to Kamaria's point, on what are you doing? Why are you doing that? How can that enable and create impact? Psychological safety and trust really have to be the core foundation for how we lead, and making sure that employees really have that opportunity, knowing that hey, if I'm getting great recognition along the way, that might open the door to raise my hand for more feedback, and not be afraid to, shy away from asking some of those difficult questions or things I might be holding on to because maybe I should know that, or maybe I'll be judged for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For sake of time, Kamari, I'm going to skip to the next question if that's okay with you.
Oh, no.
I looked at the time and I know Megan's face is going to pop up in a second to let us know that's time for Q&A. But Adri, thank you so much for answering that one. That state of recognition report, I also will email out after this. It's going to be a jam-packed email after this webinar. But Kamaria, for our final question before we hit the Q&A, we talk a lot about outdated systems. This goes for, a lot of places, not just for recognition, but many companies still rely on these outdated systems, outdated recognition programs, whatever they may be doing, and sometimes just treat it like a low priority. And some questions we get a lot of time. I think there's actually one in the chat already. But sometimes the people leaders on this call, the HR leaders, are all on board. They want to do something. They want to change it. They want to bring on a new system, a new way of doing things at their company. But then it stalls out when it gets to senior leadership. So what is some advice for you if you want to help these people leaders or HR leaders, convince their senior leaders that recognition is crucial and not just a perk that they're going to offer?
Yeah. So I know one of the things that I would say is that manager performance and employee performance is business performance. I always leave with that because sometimes there is a disconnect between kind of what we ask for in HR, and they make it feel very fluffy and very much like we just want to give everybody warm hugs. But the reality is, any strategy that you want to execute, no matter what it is that an executive team comes up with, performance is done through people. I know that AI is slowly changing that, but until the robots fully take over, in the meantime, performance is done through people. And so people need to be celebrated for who they are so they can bring their full selves to work. People need encouragement to keep going through the obstacles of what it takes to get projects off the ground. I don't know about some of you, but some of my projects can last literally months or years, right? We go through these phases. And if we waited till the end of projects, if we waited until we finally closed that deal or we finally built the last version of that, tech thing that we're building, we're going to lose people along the way. Our strategies will falter. Our execution will not happen. So it's not a nice to have because we want people to feel good. I think one of the things that I specialize in Enetic is really trying to help connect the business goals to what we're asking people to do and help people see that it's not just an HR thing. This is how work actually gets done. And so what I would say to senior leaders is that the investment in a performance platform or the investment in helping people leaders know how to recognize is really an investment in making sure that your strategy doesn't get stuck. Because when people lose engagement, they lose if their desire to do something, they redirect that energy. Sometimes people ask me, like, why did I name my company Enetic? And it's a combination of energy and engagement. And I always believe that we have 100% of our energy. We're all just balls of energy. And when we are less engaged, we redirect that energy someplace else. So if I want to redirect my energy towards, looking for a new job or something that's a hobby, or do you want people directing their energy toward the work that we need to get done? That is the case. That's the business case for recognition. It keeps people engaged and energized and moving your strategies forward. So that is what I tell all my senior leaders on the ops side. It's not about giving people hugs. It's about, do you want your strategy to be successful? Recognition is a huge part of that.
I love that. And I think the chat is loving what you're saying, especially the performance is done through people. I think that's a great point. And so any final thoughts from you, Adri, before we hit the Q&A?
No, Kamaria said it beautifully. I think the only thing just to reinforce is helping leaders to really translate that there is also financial impact, right? The business impact, may be measured around talent retention, right? Employee disengagement, really factoring into employees feeling checked out, not being able to bring their best selves or deliver the highest performance, right? So many areas. For the sake of time, I'm happy to continue the conversation later and we will share out the state of recognition report. But I think so important to speak the language of business leaders to help them understand what does this mean on the ground so that it doesn't look like this is just a perk or a recognition program as a nice to have, but like a critical must have to really make a difference in our people and human capital workforce planning.
I love that. Again, something else to add to our follow-up email, but I will share a recording from another webinar we did with two C-suite executives, just really talking about just the business impact that recognition has. But until we get there, I will pass it over to Megan after a quick commercial break. I wouldn't be doing my job as the marketing person here at Bonusly if I didn't launch a poll just asking if you would like more information on Bonusly. You know, we talk a lot about recognition here. We are firm believers that recognition powers performance. And I just, again, love Kamaria's point of, you know, people are your performance. And so launch this poll. If you want to speak to someone just to see how the Bonusly platform could work for you, there were so many questions in the chat around, we do this, or we might do this, or we thought about doing this. We can help you do all of that. And so please answer that poll. We would love to chat more with you. And most importantly, I'm going to drop our speakers' LinkedIn's. I'll drop it a few times during the Q&A, but I would love for you to connect with them if you have any questions on what they said. If you're in the Orlando area and want to get coffee with Maria, I know she would love to. And so please connect with our speakers. Again, I'll share it in the chat a few more times during the Q&A, but I know we're a few minutes late to the Q&A, so I will pass it to Megan.
All good. I think everybody was happy that you're late because the conversation was so good. So thank you so much to our entire panel. You all are wonderful humans and professionals. Before we get started with the Q&A, I just want to remind everyone that recertification activity ID is coming, but we want to get through a couple of these questions because they are important. But we will get you that activity ID here soon. So David, you were right. You definitely took one of my questions I was going to ask, but that's okay. I'll move to the next one. So we've seen a lot of peer-to-peer recognition really boost morale in some places. And this particular attendee wants to know, have you seen it work better than manager-led programs, and what made the difference?
I'm happy to jump in on this one, Megan. What I find to be most powerful about peer-to-peer recognition is it really democratizes the experience for all employees. I think like oftentimes I'll have other leaders ask like, who's really responsible for culture? Is it HR leaders? Is it managers? You know, is it really your CEO and starting from that mission? And, you know, I really find that cultures that look at recognition done right really bring the whole team aboard on that experience. And I think that when we think about day-to-day work that our teams are doing, sometimes the closest people that are going to see your work in action are going to be your peers, right? And when you see the magic of other employees just sharing those wins with you and recognizing like, absolutely incredible job on that, or like you always go above and beyond for me, you get this ripple effect and beautiful storytelling that just empower and bring up the team, but also have this beautiful special effect in your culture of everyone chiming in, everyone feeling included, and people just feeling inspired and motivated and getting to know each other even better, which I think is hands down, you know, takes the weight off of managers, and really enables HR and leaders together to build that culture as one team.
Yeah. And I wanted to add to that I don't think it's either or, I think it's both. You know, one of the things that I encourage managers to do regularly is to ask team members, is there anyone that we should recognize for doing great work? Because that allows the manager to then go say, hey, you know, Megan, I was talking to David and he said that you did an amazing job at X, Y, and Z. And so if managers can think of themselves as the orchestrator or sort of the ringmaster of what's happening on their teams, then employees get the best. They get peer-to-peer because I've asked and I've prompted you enough for you to remember that I'm going to ask you. So you should be looking for your team members to who you want to tell me. And then I'm going to say, hey, did you recognize that person? Go do it, right? And so you're making it a part of your team's culture, which I think is the best of both worlds.
But and that actually kind of dovetails into the next question. You know, what are ways you can suggest to try to empower employees on teams to recognize each other? However, some of them don't have any desire to recognize each other, but how can you encourage them? I think that suggestion ties to that question as well, but what are any other thoughts you might want to add to that as far as getting and encouraging your employees to recognize each other?
So, for me, and it's going to sound one way, but I'm going to explain it. I would say I like to use FOMO and low key shame. I'm just going to go put it out there. So, here's the deal. When you create a culture of recognition, I always tell people I joined a hospital system once, and during my very first week of work, during our time in our team meeting, we were handing out recognition coupons, right? This is my second day of work, and I see people recognizing each other. It's where we've parked that behavior. The very next week, I had my coupons ready because I was not going to be the only person at the table not recognizing people. When we build some structure and some routine and some habit around it, it encourages people to participate, but in a way that's comfortable for them. So you don't have to give somebody a coupon. You could say, good job. You could say, here, we're going to do it. But when we have some structure and habit and rhythm around what we're doing, it encourages people to say, you know what, I'm going to recognize too. And you give them a variety of ways, as Bonusly does, to be able to do that and participate. But when there's visibility to it, it does encourage people to kind of jump in and get their feet wet.
I love that. It's really great. And we're running out of time. So Adrian, I'm not trying to cut you off. I just want to get to the next question if it's okay. What do you do how do you handle when an employee wants to be recognized in a certain way, or the perceived idea of how their contribution should be recognized or rewarded? How do you deal with this, especially when someone may have expected a promotion or more pay, but in some cases you can't necessarily do either of those? How do you handle that perceived idea of their contribution recognition?
It's a really great and thoughtful question. And I think it goes back to some of the earlier discussion on really leaning into getting to know your team, and what motivates them. How do they like to be recognized? And, we at Bonusly know that, for example, we have someone on my team that really, really just shies away, from public recognition, appreciates it, but it's much more meaningful in that one-on-one setting or within our little people team, which is 3 of us strong. And, just learning through those moments, asking the questions is a wonderful way to just be in touch. What I love doing is I have a get to know me profile as I have new people join the team, and every so often we refresh that. So it's a great way to really understand what motivates you. What's your working style? How do you like to receive feedback? On the separate question of if someone was, expecting a raise and promotion, there's so much packed in, that I could share. But what I really think is keeping transparency and trust front and center is what really matters, right? There may be circumstances given today's economy, right? And business, revenue, tariffs, so much going on in the world today for why companies may just be not holding, but really just being more mindful around how do we look at spend. And I think that the more we can just lead with transparency, it's not the last time someone will ever receive a raise, but really looking at what is the why behind, or if somebody just wasn't ready for that promotion. I think ongoing continuous feedback on if someone didn't receive it this time, these are the steps we're going to work towards together to ensure over the next maybe 6 months or years course, what we're going to do together and what my commitment is as a manager to help you get there. And Corey, I'd love to get into you and your thoughts here too.
That is such an intricate question, isn't it? Because I think when we think about promotions and raises, employees tend to see that as the ultimate thank you. And when that system does not evoke what they feel is parity or fairness, it's really hard for the other things that we do to matter to them. And so I think part of, for a people leader, the struggle is to balance what's happening in the organization with individual needs of employees and to really think about what that looks like. And so recognition in and of itself is a part of a broader performance management landscape, and one can't always substitute for the other. Meaning, I can't say thank you enough with recognition tools if our entire performance management system is not working the way it's supposed to, and employees don't feel like they're getting the outcomes from it. So I think in that instance, I think for people leaders, it's really to make sure you have a clear understanding of not just their goals around promotion or around, a rating, but where are they trying to go with that? right? And how can I reward you towards that? And what I mean by that is like, if I know that you're trying to get promoted, maybe one of my recognitions to you is an introduction to someone else on the, a senior leader, so they can get to know you. I can reward you with an experience that's going to help you gain more access to something. So I think we have to think about it in a bigger, broader picture to say, maybe I can't give you the promotion, but maybe I can reward you with the things that continue to prepare you for the next step in your career.
That is so perfect and so smart. Thank you for sharing that. While we put up the recertification activity ID, I want to open us up to one final question for you both. In some environments, recognition can become unintentionally political, being withheld from certain folks or overused on others. How do managers prevent favoritism or control? We would love to hear your perspectives as we wrap up today's wonderful webinar.
It's such a good question, and it's a very fair point, right? I think that there's some teams that just naturally are more in the spotlight. So when you're closing deals, like I remember there was one company I worked at, people would like ring the gong, or you see all these like big Slack announcements. And then when you think about your teams like IT, finance, even HR in a lot of ways, there's a lot of work that's more naturally done behind the scenes, right? And not as visibly celebrated. So I encourage really thinking about from that lens that this is a common common nuance in like many organizations. And I think for managers, leaders, HR to really just be in touch with that. And again, think about, leaning into who are the teams that are most prevalently recognized? What are some ways that we could look at our unsung heroes, or just make sure that we're really, if we've recognized product a lot, then maybe in our next all hands, we want to give a nice shout out to sales or marketing. I would really encourage like being authentic around the recognition, but also really looking at that holistically across your org and being mindful of those that are doing incredible things behind the scenes, but just might not be as visible given the nature of their role or being remote. So being in touch to make sure that that culture reflects all teams and rotates as best as possible.
Yeah. I'll really quickly add to that. I think for me, the solution is intentionality. One of the things I encourage, people leaders and senior leaders to think about is, as you're thinking about projects, what are the milestones, right, that you could be recognizing in those milestones, and who are the people associated with them? So even, if we're celebrating the launch of a product, yes, the product team did that, but HR helped them to have the people to do the work, right? So how do we create success that goes downstream to all the people that would have been involved in that? And then how do we become intentional about, there I go again. And then how do we become intentional about finding recognition moments that are unseen? I once had someone on my team, we were going back and forth about a tool we were using that we were struggling with. And finally, she was fresh out of college. She goes, "This isn't working. We need to move on." And the whole room got really, really quiet. And then the next meeting, I gave her the Tell It Like It Is award, because I was like, this is a behavior that I want to see repeated by other people. So I'm going to take this moment to create a recognition moment. So I think when we continue to teach people intentionality about it, they will start to look for those opportunities to maybe recognize things that are maybe not as, not the low-hanging fruit as a sales win or a major thing that we recognize.
Perfect. Well, I'm so sorry to say this. I want to carry this conversation on for so much longer, but we are out of time. But I've learned so much from all three of you. Thank you so much for this excellent webinar. If you didn't catch it, if you're listening to us and not able to see the screen, the activity ID is 709019. Again, 709019, and this has been approved for 1 HR credit. Maria, Adri, David, thank you so much for this wonderful webinar. I've taken away some great tools that I'll use with my own team and hope that our audience has done the same. So thank you all. We hope to see you soon. And I'll see you this weekend in California.
Yes.
See you in California.
Cannot wait. Thank you everyone so much.
Yes.
care,
Have a great
everybody.
day. Thank you.